Hey guys, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is actually going to be my latest Game Week 1 draft. And the reason why it's changed from the previous video is simply because after looking at the preseason, I do still want to kind of keep the concept of investing into this Chelsea team. They do seem like they will actually start the early fixtures with quite a healthy start. And the issue here is that I don't really want to invest into the Chelsea defense. It's actually the Chelsea attack that I want to invest into. Players like Nkunku and Jackson have looked quite good so far. I'm also waiting to actually see how Nkunku and Jackson actually play together because so far in the preseason, they've played minutes away from each other. So it'll be interesting to see based on what Pochettino has said so far that Nkunku can play a wide variety of roles, such as the 10 position, which could be quite interesting to see if, let's say, Nkunku became a 90-minute player, which is our expectation, how he'd interrelate with maybe Jackson coming on as a sub or even Jackson starting as soon as Game Week 1, just because he's looked so good in the preseason. As far as the draft, this is going to be a 3-4-3 template. And so I'm moving a little bit away from that sort of rotation structure that I introduced in the video where I mentioned I would be using Chilwell. In this structure here, I'm actually going to switch Ruben Diaz to Stones. I just think we can't really deny it anymore. And potentially my fears as well with Stones losing out in minutes just because he's an early rotation sub when he needs to be rested is a little bit too cautious for the early doors. And I do think that you've got Stones here, an opportunity where he gets fantastic opportunities just outside the edge of the box sometimes, which is the role that he will play when he plays in the midfield. And that should allow for Stones to actually get a healthy amount of returns, at least foreseeably compared to, let's say, Ruben Diaz, who will just be a set piece threat. As far as Stones, that's why he lands a spot in my team. Gabriel and Estupiñán, these players have not changed. Of course, what you'll notice as well is that Onana has joined the team. This is something that I was talking about in the previous video when I had a Flecken draft, and obviously, Onana does seem to be a much more appealing option. I like the idea of still being able to invest into United. I think their fixtures are actually fantastic. Probably, in my opinion, the second best fixtures when you look at Game Week 1 to 10 trajectory. And the reason why that is simply because this United team have shown that they're very capable, particularly at home, and they have really positive home fixtures. So Onana is someone that I really want to get. And the reason why I'm going for Onana as opposed to Shaw is I do think that 0.5 million cost saving is actually really helpful for the team. Anywhere I need an upgrade in the future, particularly with the 0.5 in the bank, is something that I would like to use. And the 0.5 in the bank is something that I'm losing because I'm going away from Flecken, a 4.5 keeper, and now moving into Onana. Now, of course, you can still go for Flecken. I still think he's actually the best 4.5 keeper. But for now, I think my draft structure still allows to go for Onana, and I'm bypassing Shaw as well. Now, if we move on to the midfield, what I actually have here is Mbeumo, Rashford, Fernandes, and Saka. And this is actually the main structure that I would say that I will actually keep no matter what draft I have. I do actually prefer Mbeumo to Mitoma. I've talked about in previous videos. I think Mitoma actually gets into fantastic positions, and a lot of people have been talking about how unclinical he's been as of late. And yes, that's a little bit true, but at the same time, he was getting into great positions, and actually his underlying stats improved game to game. So for me, Mbeumo and Matoma are practically like a 51 to 49 sort of situation where you just have to pick one over the other. For me, it's actually Mbeumo who slightly edges it, and he's on penalties. That's the biggest thing here. Yes, of course, he's going to lose Tony as a strike partner. I'm not even expecting necessarily for Mbeumo to become the striker of the team. All I need for Mbeumo to be is actually just to be the winger that he was last season and to maintain the sort of great underlying stats that he had even when Tony was out of the team. And with penalties, which is what we should expect, because if you cast your mind back to the Nottingham Forest game where Mbeumo took a penalty, Wisa was actually on the pitch as well earlier last season. So Mbeumo should 100% be the penalty taker, and that's already the advantage that I need over Mitoma to start with the season. And for me, Brentford also have better fixtures if we look a little bit longer term. So I don't necessarily need to actually go for Mitoma and then maybe book a transfer away from him, or even need to think about options outside of Mitoma early doors. As far as Rashford, Fernandes, and Saka, ultimately these players, I think, especially since I'm going for a no Salah, no Trent structure, these are the players I'd love to keep because I don't really see myself having to force a transfer off of them. I still completely back United and Arsenal's teams. These are some of the talismans of the teams. Of course, this Arsenal team have much more threats in terms of how many options we can really pick, like a Martinelli, like an Odegaard, even Jesus that we might or might not see later on. But that's my opinion. I think Saka is still someone that you want to get. He's at a great price point. I would always prefer the penalty taker if possible, particularly if the underlying stats are very comparable to the sort of alternative options. So, for example, if you look at Rashford, the big difference between him and Bruno, of course, is that Rashford has incredible XG. And when you look at Saka, Odegaard, Martinelli, there isn't too much to really draw a difference between these players, particularly in open play. I just think that Martinelli and Odegaard actually had slightly better finishing expressed last season, but that's not always going to be consistent year on year. That you're going to be an overperformer. As far as Rashford, though, those XG numbers are there, and he is clearly a step above a lot of other midfielders, and that's why he finds his way into this draft. And Fernandes, I just like the idea of going for both of them. Ultimately, if United sign a forward, which I think they will, particularly Rasmus Højlund, you'll probably have actually more options for Fernandes to actually get assists over. He was someone who actually underperformed last season when it comes to goal scoring, and I don't think we've seen that Bruno Fernandes is particularly like a poor finisher. So I actually expect him to actually probably step up a little bit in that aspect this season as well. So that's why I'm actually going for this 3-4 structure. And then obviously, if you look at the forwards now, I've gone for Nkunku, Haaland, and Jesus. And the reason why I've actually moved towards Nkunku is because I'll simply think about it, right? The Liverpool fixture, what's the worst part about it? Chelsea usually do play Liverpool. It's always a 0-0 game, as people expect. If you actually look historically at the head-to-head, that seems to be the case. But I do think that this is a dramatically different Chelsea team. There isn't really much to be taken away from previous Chelsea squads. Ultimately, when you actually look at it, this Chelsea team actually has benefited from 2 forwards being signed, Nkunku and Jackson. And these central strikers are actually going to be a huge difference for the team. And I do think Chelsea will start off with a bang. And I'm also not very confident in the Liverpool defense, if we're being honest. And that's sort of why I've also gone away from Trent draft structures. And Kuku's going to find his way to the team. I just expect for him to actually have more minutes than someone like Jackson. And the reason why is because Pochettino has mentioned that he can play a multiple variety of roles. You could also talk about the transfer fee. I don't really like to pay too much attention to that, but ultimately, if he can play on the wings, if he can play as a 10, if he can also play as a lone striker, I just think that Nkunku is going to have the most amount of minutes within this Chelsea attack for the beginning of the season. As far as Haaland, I don't think he's really a non-negotiable. I can understand people going for no Haaland drafts. I still haven't really debuted a no Haaland draft that I really liked. I've had a look at them. I'm not really confident in them. You could definitely go for Salah. I think he would be the premium that I prefer if you were to, let's say, drop Haaland in a team structure. But for now, I'm clearly just 100% into Haaland. And then Jesus is going to be rounding out this draft. And Jesus is someone that a lot of people have been comparing to Martinelli as of late. I can understand why you want to go for Martinelli. In fact, this draft structure itself can still go for Martinelli in a 3-5-2. And that actually could be something that could work out quite well. Jesus is someone who we know is a poor finisher. I've talked about it in almost every episode that I've been in. But the key thing here is that he's also a very creative player as a striker, and he actually gets a fantastic amount of XG. So even if he underperforms in terms of goal scoring, he still gets into much better positions than anyone else in this Arsenal team consistently. So that's why I would like to start with Jesus in the beginning. And at the same time, when we're actually looking at some players like Wilson, like Watkins, you can already see that there's an incredible amount of talent and some very, very strong teams with their leading strikers being at the same price range as Jesus. So anytime I really need to move away from Jesus, maybe move back into an Arsenal midfielder, I could. At the same time, I don't see any reason to, let's say, necessarily move away from this 8.0 forward position, particularly when you have a Wilson and a Watkins at your disposal. And honestly, when we're looking at the Newcastle Aston Villa game, once again, just showing that these two teams should be leading offenses for the coming season. So that's why I've gone for this 3-4-3 structure. As far as the bench, I'm actually going with Botman. And the reason why I've gone for Botman over someone like Colwill is because of what I was talking about in terms of how confident I am in the defense. If I actually think that I can get away with, let's say, not necessarily playing Botman early doors, then I can maybe actually just think about a transfer from Estupinian towards Chilwell with 0.5 in the bank. And that will allow me to move into Chilwell. And that will actually cover my sort of want to have a Chelsea defender, particularly an attacking one when the fixtures are really good and they actually play Luton. And then Botman can actually come in as a sort of fourth defender who has really good fixtures, let's say game weeks 5 onwards. And I don't really want to book a transfer for my 4.5 defender. It's ultimately a position that I don't care about too much for the time being, but you'd rather this defender be useful long term. Newcastle, if I don't wildcard early, it could be super helpful towards that cause. As far as Baldock, the reason why I'm going for him is there's a bit of a restrictiveness in this structure in that there are no great 4.5 mids, no great 4.5 forwards. But I think when you think about it, if you're going 3-5-2, you're going to face the same problem with the strikers. Whereas when you're going 3-4-3, you're going to face this sort of problem with the midfielders. Hamada is someone who's actually gotten some great minutes in the Crystal Palace preseason so far. Hopefully he actually becomes a nailed starter. I don't really think that's going to happen, but he does seem like someone who can be an interesting super sub that will actually play most games at the very minimum to get that 1 point. So I do like him for now as that sort of 4.5 million placeholder. And Baldock, he simply just doesn't have blank fixtures, particularly when I'm not going to be relying on Botman early on because his fixtures are poor. I'll need Baldock because he doesn't have a blank. And that's pretty much why I've gone for this 3-4-3 team. What do you guys think about the team? Do you prefer 3-5-2? Are you high on Nkunku, maybe Chelsea's offense? Are you higher on Chelsea's offense or their defense? Let me know in the comments, please. Thank you guys so much for watching, as I said, and I'll see you guys in the next video.